here we are in Los Angeles on September 16th, having a conversation with our artist, our Los Angeles artist who did an amazing commemorative design and poster for us for CicLAvia's 10th birthday. And you and I both want to know a little bit more about Brian and his being in LA and how he sees LA and CicLAvia. So Brian, we can ask you questions or you can just talk, but welcome to our CicLAvia podcast.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. And thanks again for asking me to create such a fun image for such an important event and an important anniversary too.
Thank you. Thank you. So everyone smiles and just giggles when they see your artwork. So we are just so pleased and grateful that you agreed to work with us. Thank you.
Well, you know, it's funny, Alex, you and I had a handful of conversations about direction in the beginning. And I think we had some kind of preconceived ideas about what we thought might be kind of a cool direction. We wanted to, you know, you had mentioned a couple of pieces that were really quite busy. And I think in the end, we found like a really nice sweet spot between something that feels diverse, inclusive, busy, you know, active and animated on some level, but also is kind of calm and spacious enough to kind of feel a bit like it has that California, LA vibe to it as well, you know? So it's kind of, I think we found a kind of nice middle ground between all those things. And I think also when we threw out maybe some of our preconceived ideas about what we wanted it to be and just kind of went off and created something that was like the craziest option of all, that ultimately ended up being the one that I think we all chose and sort of responded to. So that was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. So I love that when I look at it, it feels so clearly CicLAvia-esque. And you just said, Brian, something that made me realize you're not a native Californian. You came here from New York. Could you talk a little bit about the journey from New York and the work you were doing at the New York Times and all that to coming to LA?
Yeah. So I was in New York I grew up on the East Coast, up in New England, in Massachusetts, and made my way down to Baltimore for college. I went to art school at MICA down in Baltimore, and then of course everyone who goes to art school eventually gravitates or tries to get to New York for a period of time. And I logged some years there. I was there for about 11 years, and jumping back and forth between working as an illustrator and I also worked as an art director at the New York Times on the opinion page. So kind of straddling those two worlds and jumping back and forth between art direction, design, and illustration. And then just kind of made a real kind of conscious decision that, you know, my time was up in New York, and I wanted to find more balance between living and working. And California really allowed, you know, sort of provided that. You know, I grew up, you know, in the outdoors, and I knew I wasn't going to end up back up in New England, but I just really fell in love with California. You know, it's so much nature. Obviously, I surf. I love hiking, and you know, weather's not so bad. And so I ended up here. And the cool thing about, I mean, I think we all could kind of agree, and we all understand the value of the outdoor experience here. But the cool thing about when I got here was the art community was really kind of exploding. And I think for someone who had just left a job working at a company at the New York Times, I was really keen to open up a studio and produce my own work, tell my own stories with my drawings and paintings. And it was kind of like just landing at in the right place at the right time. You know, when I first got here, if you said you were an artist on some level, people would be like, oh, you can do animation, you can direct a film, you can make a mural, you can have a gallery show. And I didn't feel that sense of openness and freedom in New York. I think in New York, and maybe this was partly due to where I was in my career, you kind of had to stay in your lane in terms of what you were doing creatively. And in LA, it was just kind of like, it's wide open. You could really kind of do whatever you wanted. And it hasn't changed since I've been here. I've been here for 10 years now, and it hasn't changed at all. So.
Well, I think you've become a known quantity in our city. Even though we're spread out, I think a lot of people are very aware of your work. I met you when you were doing a mural in Santa Monica on the side of a building that faced the metro.
Yeah, yeah.
That was, that to me, seen your work. For me, the connection to you was Modern Love, because I had read that column in the New York Times forever and seen your illustrations for that. And then to meet the person who had done that, doing a giant mural on the side of a building, was quite remarkable. Do you remember the circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, it was part of a bigger mural exhibition that was being held at Art Center, and they were looking to kind of extend, the murals further and further out from the school. And Ann Field, who is the chair of the illustration program at Art Center, had approached me about it, and then I met you, Sandra, and then it was there's such an unbelievably deep mural tradition here in LA. So you kind of respect what's been done. You kind of you recognize the diversity of all the things that have been created. Whether it's street art to mosaic work. Some of the work that like the WPA post office murals and things like that exist here in LA or in some of the civic buildings. So there's, and then there's everything in the middle, right? So I've never seen more murals in any other city that, with the exception of maybe Barcelona, but I think that probably was partly due to the Olympics at one point, but it's just such a cool thing to be a part of that. I've done a couple of murals here in the city, and that was one of them that was kind of special because it was, it reflected something about, the ocean. It reflected other parts of the city, but it was like a really simple piece that hopefully people could respond to as they were, driving on their way, like sitting on the train on their way over to Santa Monica.
The CicLAvia is not an event, it's a state of mind. And what we have discovered that it's just beloved. So there's this ongoing recognition that CicLAvia equals community, even in COVID-19.
Yeah.
So I guess, Brian, I would ask you from an artist's perspective, what makes CicLAvia special to you? Or why did you agree to do the assignment? I know a ton of people are asking you to do their work.
Sure. No, it was actually a really easy choice, honestly. I really feel like the first, when I participated in CicLAvia the first time, it might have been maybe the first or second event. It was right when I got to, it was probably maybe a few years into being in LA. And just doing that one event completely changed my attitude and my observations of Los Angeles, right? Like we all know LA driving in our cars, but when you get out and walk around in Los Angeles, when you slow down, when you actually, on the ground, on the sidewalk, walking in and out of neighborhoods that you probably wouldn't otherwise go into, you get a completely different perspective of the city. And there's no other event that really allows you to do that, in any way, the way that CicLAvia, offers you that chance. And so after doing that, I mean, coming to the West Coast was like about exploration, but, I was like throwing a rock in the water, but I didn't have any rings going out, right? So I'm like in the city, but I hadn't really left my neighborhood, or I hadn't kind of explored. I'd gone over to friends' houses in different neighborhoods, but it's all the kind of neighborhoods that we always go to. But this was different. This was then like, oh, wow, this is over here. I'm going to go down there next weekend and check that out. That was, like that neighborhood was amazing. I didn't know that food existed there. And so from that, it kind of reopened, my sense of exploration and my sense of appreciation for the things that the city of Los Angeles offers.
Yeah, I think it's a parallel to Jonathan Gold and his exploration for traditional food in strip malls that you would never be looking for the places to go. And I think that when he was still here, there was a celebration. Food seems to be a part of CicLAvia as well. You cannot think about it without thinking about what you're going to eat along the route, or you're going to go back and catch afterwards.
Yeah.
So I love that it captured your imagination as a new person to LA.
Yeah. And also I think too, as an artist, I mean, from my perspective, as someone who's, primarily known as an illustrator, like a big part of what my responsibility is as an artist is to observe, right? And to kind of be looking and seeing and keeping an open mind to certain things. And so there's the visual component of CicLAvia that's amazing, right? Just, I mean, the crazy ass people who are part of the event, and the music, so that, you have you have the visual, you have the audio, then you have food, you have the smells, going through different, things are being cooked, things are being made. And it's just, it's like a fully sensory experience, plus joy, right? Like, it's just cool to do it, and you're kind of cruising along and you meet people and you're hanging out, and then you get to like another area where people have stopped and you're like, oh, what are you eating? Oh, and you kind of have a drink or two, and then you kind of move on to something else. And I just love this, for me, it's really, a big part of it is observation, but it's just the energy, those events are great.
I remember at the 100th birthday party we're 10, CicLAvia is 10 years old, and the LA Phil's 100 years old, and UCLA. And at the 100th birthday party for the LA Phil, I was standing at MacArthur Park, and Nirvan, who Alex knows, he's a friend of ours, who was one of the founders of CicLAvia or close to it. We're standing there, and a guy walks up, and Nirvan said, oh, can we get a picture of you? And it was Dudamel. And there he was, just standing on the sidewalk. He went, oh, sure, who is our conductor of the symphony. And I thought, this would only happen at CicLAvia, because it's this joyful community of everyone who's in the city. And I think sometimes we can be a little isolated. Well, certainly now with COVID, people are desperate to be reunited. But also you think, oh, I can't do that because of the traffic or this or that. And I think you said it beautifully, and your art says it beautifully. It brings together the whole city in ways we don't usually join together as a city. And we meet all kinds of people that we don't see in our regular work or in our regular play. And some of those people become our new friends. Yeah.
Well, it's an event that's bigger than us as individuals, right? It's like, I feel like it's a little bit like, if the Lakers win the, championship, it's like the party afterward, like when they, or like at a Dodgers game, it's like, the suit, like every single aspect of Los Angeles is in that stadium, right? And you're all there to celebrate one thing, right? And it's the same thing, with kind of victory parade. It's the same kind of thing. And in many ways, CicLAvia is a kind of victory parade, but it's just about the city of LA, winning, right?
How has, you have a studio in Chinatown.
Yeah.
How has that evolved, or what do you see happening in that little tiny Chinatown neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're in one of the plazas, and there's a number of them kind of scattered throughout Chinatown. There has been a lot of development, some high-rise building. I say high-rise, but apartment complexes kind of going in, and some more, being developed. But I've noticed the neighborhood itself is, obviously a lot more food, really unique food spots going in. A lot more, it's always been a place, at least, in the since the 70s, it's been a place that, the artists have kind of gravitated towards. Musicians, obviously, there's a lot of great music venues there, a lot of great punk bands and new wave bands, and obviously jazz and things like that. So Chinatown is kind of, and that's just in a very short, kind of history that at least I'm familiar with. But then, of course, there's the bigger back history about Chinatown as a community, that the people who have lived there for a longer period of time, obviously, than I've even been alive. And it's definitely changing. I've noticed a lot more artists moving into our area, but it's different than the arts district. It's not a lot of outward facing art studios. It's mostly just people are actually producing. They go to their studio. They don't open their door to the outside. It's they go into their studio, they make their work, then they go home. It's not like a storeroom or a showroom. It's more like a workspace in many ways, at least in the plaza that I'm in Mandarin Plaza.
We're really thrilled to have your art as part of our 10th celebration, because we can say, look at this, when we can't get together with people.
Yeah.
I want to close with one last question. What do you imagine for the future of Los Angeles?
Well, I mean, my hope is that, events like CicLAvia, I mean, think about it. I was thinking about this when we had agreed to, chat, and I was thinking about the challenges that, that the organization's faced with. But then I started thinking about like how great a party it's going to be. Like the first one after all of this, after we get through this period in history, how big a party that's going to be for CicLAvia. The fact that we can all get together, and I guess to answer your question, I mean, my belief and my hope is that, that we have more connectedness between all these neighborhoods and between all of the, the diversity that exists in LA. It's the thing that makes us amazing. But if we're isolated, it doesn't, it kind of fractures this amazing quilt of people that exist here. And, I was reading something about, even like the mountain lions that exist in LA, they're not able to get from one neighborhood to another to meet other mountain lions. And it kind of breaks your heart, right? But then I started thinking, well, shit, that's us too, right? Like we're kind of, stuck in this, and sometimes it's obviously because of, really dramatic things like a pandemic, but it's also sometimes by choice. Like we don't actively get out there and go and explore and see these other neighborhoods. And my hope is that connectedness begins to develop more so that we get a tighter fabric on the community. And whether it's bike paths, footpaths, maybe just more events like this that allow people to see all these other neighborhoods. My hope is that we have more of that in the future.
So
and good nature paths to go over the 101 as well. So.
Yes.
That's in the plans, I think.
I hope so.
Us and the mountain lions can cross together, the freeway together. I want to do one tiny last part of your art, which I don't think we talked about earlier, which is books. Mm-hmm. And if you can remind me of the title of Death.
Oh, Death Wins the Goldfish. Yeah.
Death Wins the Goldfish. It's a book that Alex and her daughter, how old is your daughter, Alex?
She's 14.
So whether you're 73, my age, or you are 14, or it's one of those books that has incredible appeal across the age span, and Death Wins the Goldfish, I would highly recommend it. Oh, now you're working on a new book, right?
Yeah, it's coming out in October. It's this one was a bit easier because there's no writing in it. It's just a picture. It's like an art book, and it's called Avoid This. And I convinced them to not put anything else on the cover except for the title. So
that's great.
So you have to buy it and look inside at what I'm supposed to be avoiding. Boy, exactly. That is a Rorschach test, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, Brian Rea, talking to you in your kitchen, right near downtown LA. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate your participation in CicLAvia with your art and your heart. And we hope you're here in 10 years to celebrate our 20th birthday.
Well, me too. Thank you so much, you guys. I really appreciate it.